And before I read the couple of verses, let me just give you a little background. You know, by the time Paul wrote this, he was actually being held, he was imprisoned in Rome, he was in shackles, and he knew that some of his friends around the country were really concerned about him. Much like, you know, how many of you have been praying and praying for the return of Pastor Saeed? Yeah, from Iran. And much like that, you know, millions of us around the world have been praying for this man who's been imprisoned for 3 years for his faith. And so the believers in Philippi and Thessalonica and all sorts of different places, they know Paul's in prison. And they're concerned, they're worried about him, they're praying for him. So Paul is writing a letter to them, just simply saying, here, listen guys, God is in this. All the palace guard know that I'm here in chains because of my love for the Lord. And it's actually making the other believers stronger. So he writes to them, and then it comes to this part that I think really hits me where I live, and I hope does for you too. I'm going to read from Philippians chapter 3, verses 10 through 14. And this isn't just, so often we kind of put the Bible over there as just some kind of holy book. But God said this is alive. It's God's living word. And it was written from our brother to us. So Paul's talking about his desire to live a life that honors God. And he says, I don't mean to say that I've already achieved these things, or that I've already reached perfection, but I press on to possess that perfection for which Christ Jesus first possessed me. No, dear brothers and sisters, I have not achieved it, but I focus on this one thing, forgetting the past and looking forward to what lies ahead. I press on to reach the end of the race and receive the heavenly prize for which God, through Christ Jesus, is calling us. I've probably spent the last 3 or 4 weeks just sitting with these few verses and asking God to speak to me. And if you're the kind of girl that likes to take notes like me, write these 3 words down, because the 3 words that I take from this text are focus, forget, and finish. So focus. What does it mean to focus? You know, Paul is clearly using the illustration of a runner in a race. And I found myself thinking, I wonder if there ever has been a recorded instance of maybe a runner who was about to win a race, like the Olympics or some big race, but at the last minute lost focus. So I kind of Googled that. You can find all sorts of stuff nowadays. And what I discovered was that back in 1954, there were 2 men who were the fastest runners on the planet. They were the only ones who had broken the 4-minute mile. One was a British guy called Roger Bannister, and one was an Australian guy called John Landy. And they were both pretty much, I mean, they were as fast as each other. And so what happened was, it was the Commonwealth Games, it was the final race, it was 1,500 meters. They both know we can both win this. And so they started off the race, and they're pretty much neck and neck until it comes to the final lap, and John Landy, the Australian, begins to take the lead. But it's at that point he did something really interesting. He stopped. Not only didn't stop running, but for a second, he looked over his left shoulder to see where Roger Bannister was. And in that moment, Roger overtook him on the right, and he won the race. And I found myself thinking about that a lot, because I thought, you know, Lord, if we want it as women, as your women, to finish this race well, how do we focus? And how does that relate to our purpose? You know, I grew up in a small Baptist church in Scotland, and I thought that the way I made God happy was by what I did. You know, I could be a missionary, or I could be, you know, a Christian teacher. It took me years to understand that it's what God is doing in us and then through us that we really discover what our purpose is. And let me show you how that came kind of clear for me. Have you ever been talked into doing something because you're in a good mood? That's actually maybe why you're here this weekend. Somebody said, hey, you want to go to that women's thing? And you're like, yeah, sure. And then you wake up today and it's all cold and you say, why did I say that? Well, that's what happened to me. I was a student at seminary in California, and one day my best friend Marlene called and asked me if I was doing anything on Saturday. And I said, no, do you want to do something? And she said, actually, I'd be really grateful if you could do something for me. And I said, sure, I can. And she said, would you drive to Palm Springs and speak at a women's luncheon at a private country club? And I said, no. And she said, actually, I really need you to do it, Sheila. And I said, Marlene, it's not that I'm not willing to do it. I don't know how to do that. I had never spoken before in my life. My background was television. I worked for 5 years in London with the BBC, and I worked for 5 years with the Christian Broadcasting Network. But there's not I'm getting up on a stage with a microphone and speaking to women. I mean, I'd rather stick my hand in a blender, honestly. So I said, let's face it, Marlene, you know every woman that God has called into this ministry almost in the States. Ask one of them. And this is what she said. Now remember, this is my best friend. And I'm quoting her exactly. She said, I've asked them all, you're the bottom of the barrel. And I said, well, because I love you, I will go. But please tell them this was all you could get. Well, I woke up that morning and I thought, why did I say I would do that? So I got into my car and I'm driving the hour and a half to Palm Springs, and I feel obliged to have a short conversation with the Lord. And I said, Lord, I just want to apologize up front, because you are not going to look good today. This is not going to be a home run for the kingdom. Well, I got there and it was worse than I thought. 1,000 women, these beautiful tables and crystalline china, and they all came in their chauffeur-driven limousines, little Chanel suits, perfect makeup. Interestingly enough, faces that didn't move. But I learned about that later. So I got up the podium, and I just had one of those moments where I just shot up one of those prayers. Father, what do I do? And in my spirit, I felt he answered. Just tell the truth. Okay. So I said, hello, you lovely ladies. My name is Sheila, and 7 weeks ago, I was released from a psychiatric hospital. I think some of them thought I was kidding. But I wasn't. I've been trying to escape that place all my life, running away from that would ever be part of my story. My father ended his life in a psychiatric hospital. He escaped one night and drowned himself in the river. He was 34 years old. And all my life, I thought, what if whatever was in my dad is in me? I was so afraid that I'd end up in that place. But because my father's brain injury before he died made him violent, and he and I had quite a confrontation the last day I ever saw him alive. I was 5 years old. Watching as he was trying to bring his cane down in my skull. And so the last image I had of my dad was just of this hatred in his eyes. So I grew up with such a deep sense of shame, of not being good enough. And I thought the only way that I'm going to get through this life is if I just become the perfect Christian. I'll just never fail God, because if I've lost the love of my earthly father, I can't lose the love of my heavenly Father. So I thought that was my purpose. That's how I'm going to know my purpose. I'll just work hard, and I'll work hard, and I'll work hard. And then one day it just all fell apart. And at 34, same age as my dad, I found myself in the locked ward of a psychiatric hospital for a month, diagnosed with severe clinical depression. And honestly, girls, it will sound strange, but I am eternally grateful to God for that. Some of God's mercies are severe mercies, but they are mercies nonetheless. Because when God takes you to the place you're most afraid of, and there you discover the beauty of his presence there. You know, I've loved the words of the psalmist David for years, but when you're at the bottom of the barrel, and you read words like, the Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. come alive. So I finished my story in Palm Springs and noticed that they'd stopped talking and, there were tears rolling through perfect makeup. I remember thinking, I guess you can't Botox pain.
That's true.
I said to the ladies, I'm not in a hurry. If anybody wants to talk, I'll be here. And the first person to come up to me was the person I couldn't take my eyes off at the beginning. Just one of those stunning looking women, tall, blonde, size about a half, maybe, And she took off her gold cuffs and showed me where she'd slit her wrists. And I thought, some of our masks are just more expensive, but they're serving the same purpose. When you think you have to hide who you really are. So I drove home from that thinking, wow, Lord, that was wild. I guess you knew that was going to happen. And then I get the invitation to join Women of Faith. And I think, I can't do that. I can't join this team. Lucy Swindoll is like the grand adventurer of us all. She's been on every continent. She's written books. She's been an executive. She's done everything. Marilyn Meeberg has 2 degrees. One in psychology, which is very helpful for us on the team. Free therapy. Believe it or not, we'd be worse without Marilyn. Patsy, the best storyteller I know. Thelma, such a passionate heart for God, such a history of walking faithfully, one step after the other. Look at Nicole, such a brilliant dramatist, who puts into words what is rumbling around in the cellar of our souls, and we never knew how to say it. Somebody like Anita that just makes you laugh and cry. And you know what I heard the Lord say to me when I'm trying to talk about this? He said to me, Sheila, run in your own lane. What does that mean, Lord? Run in your own lane. Every single one of us girls has been given a lane to run in. The worst thing we can do is compare ourselves to each other. But we do that. God doesn't need me in Lucy's lane. Lucy's running in her lane. I'll just trip her up. God doesn't need you to be in the lane of the woman that you think is doing better than you. He's got her. He wants you. You have a purpose, and you have a race to run that nobody else can run. Run in your own lane. That's what it means to focus, to stay focused on what's ahead. But Paul said, not only that, he said, forgetting the past. That obviously is a huge part of running a race, forgetting the past. I got a note from a woman. I had invited somebody this week. I was speaking in Austin, Texas. And every time I speak somewhere, I always say on Facebook or Twitter, hey, I've got 4 tickets if anybody wants to come. I just always like to give away 4 tickets. And I've met some of the most interesting people that way. But this woman wrote back privately and she said, I would love to come, but I wouldn't fit in. And I said, what do you mean? She said, well, some Sundays I go to church. Some Sundays I've got such a hangover from the night before, I don't go. I don't belong. And I said, you do belong. Please be my guest. So she came. And I was talking that night about the woman that Christ encountered at Jacob's well in Samaria. Remember her? Been married 5 times and was now living with a guy that wasn't her husband. The most amazing thing about that encounter was that Jesus cut through all her questions right to her heart and said to her, listen, I know you've been married 5 times, and I know the guy you're living with isn't your husband. Why did he do that? Did he do it to shame her? No. He did it so she would understand. Unless we get that God knows the worst there is about us, then the good news is not as great. Because we think, well, if you just knew this. Christ was saying to this woman, look, I know all your stuff. I love you. I came here specially today at noontime in this heat to meet you. You know, it was amazing to me at the end of that meeting on Wednesday. I had seen the woman as she came in and her countenance was very dark. And at the end of the meeting Wednesday night, she ran and hugged me. And she said, I get it. Girls, if we got that, it would change everything. I don't know what you've done up until this moment, but I want you to remember That you don't tidy yourself up to come to God. You come as you are. And you might think, well, you don't know what I've done. You don't know about the abortion. You don't know about the affair. You don't know about the drugs. You don't know about... No. But do you remember what Christ cried out right before he died? He said, "It is finished. Bill paid in full." He didn't say, "Well, that's a good start. Now over to you." No. You see, honestly, girls, it's never been about us. It's always been about him. If you could get how loved you are. Paul had a lot to put behind him. Before he became a Christian, he was the one person that was going into people's homes and dragging Christians out and throwing them in jail because he thought they were a cult. He stood and held the coats of the people who took rocks and stoned Stephen to death. He had a lot to forget. Sometimes you have to forget the bad stuff, and sometimes, girls, you have to let go of the glory days. You know, we think, well, that's the way God used to do it. God, do that again. I loved it when it was back like that. And God says, no, I'm doing a new thing. Now it springs forth. Can you not see it? Girls, I don't know what your past is, but do not let it hold you back from focusing and running in your lane. And how do we finish well? A week before Christmas, I decided to fly home to Scotland and see my mum. My mum's 85 years old and she has Alzheimer's now. And my sister had tried to kind of prepare me for the fact that Mum had lost a lot of ground since the last time I saw her. But I just don't think I was ready. Flew to Glasgow and then drove down, and the minute I walked into the lounge, I could see the back of my mum's head, and I just kind of went and jumped in front of her like, ta-da! And she kind of looked at me. And then she looked to my sister to help her. And Frances says, "Hey Mom, it's Sheila. She flew home from America to see you." She was like, "Oh, yes." Now, Mum and I have been like that all my life. She's been my greatest prayer warrior. I mean, there's been some nights when I've walked through difficult things and I thought, I don't know if anybody else on this earth is praying for me tonight, but I know my mom is. But now she's losing so much of that. And I found myself asking, Lord, this is hard to understand because all my life, all I've known is my mom is passionately committed to two things, to you and to her children. And now she seems lost somewhere. But then I looked at this picture my mom has over her bed. I've seen that picture since I was a child. My grandmother embroidered it for my mom when she was a little girl. And there it is above her head as she sleeps every night. Just two words. Yes, Lord. Yes, Lord. And I thought, you know what? That's how we finish well. We wake up every morning and we say, yes, Lord. I don't know what today is going to hold. I don't know what this year will hold. Maybe 2015 was a difficult year for you. I know it was for many of you, my friends. It was for me. But we stand on the brink of a new year, girls. We stand on the brink of a new year where God has given every one of us a lane to run in. Where he said, listen, I have forgiven your past. Leave it behind. And if you will wake up every day and just simply pray those two words in faith and trust because God is worth it. Yes, Lord. Do you know what that does in heaven? Some of you are carrying heavy burdens, but when you love God enough to say, yes, Lord, I promise you girls, you will finish well. And one of these days, you'll hear from the Lord himself, well done. Good job, good and faithful servant. And you don't have to get it right all by your own efforts. It's all a gift. It's all because of his